ExamPrep.School. Maine workers' compensation. Insurance adjuster exam, exam code 12-ME-32. There are 6 practice exams in this series. This video covers Practice Exam 1. The first 20 questions are free. In this video, we will be covering the following major categories for Practice Exam 1. Insurance terms and related concepts. Maine insurance law. Pertinent to workers' compensation. Maine workers' compensation law. Policy provisions. Let's walk through the format. I'll read each question and its choices. Let's get started. Question 1. Which of the following best defines the principle of indemnity in insurance contracts? A. Insurer's contractual right to recover claim payments from a negligent third party after loss settlement. B. Paying stated limits to a third-party claimant for bodily injury regardless of the actual damages. C. Restoring the insured to the pre-loss financial position, preventing profit from a covered loss. D. Reimbursing an insured based on a declared property value, irrespective of the actual loss sustained. A countdown circle appears in the top right. Once it completes, the answer is revealed. You can pause at any time if you'd like longer to think. If you'd like additional practice covering more topics, see the description for our book. The correct answer is C. This option describes the indemnity principle, which obligates the insurer to restore the insured to the pre-loss financial position without profit. Reason A is not correct. This refers to subrogation rights rather than the indemnity principle. Reason B is not correct. This describes third-party liability payments, not the insured's restoration under indemnity. Reason D is not correct. This describes an agreed value or valuation provision, not indemnity restoration. Question 2. Which of the following best describes the principle of subrogation in property and casualty insurance claims? A. The process by which an insurer assumes the insured's legal rights to recover a paid loss from a third party. B. A clause that allows the insurer to adjust premium rates after a loss has occurred. C. An agreement enabling the policyholder to defer payment of deductibles until litigation concludes. D. A provision that precludes coverage for losses arising from intentional acts by the insured. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is the process by which an insurer, having indemnified the insured, steps into the insured's shoes to pursue reimbursement from the party legally responsible for the loss. Reason B is not correct. Describes a premium adjustment mechanism rather than the recovery of losses from a responsible third party. Reason C is not correct. Concerns timing of deductible payments, which is unrelated to an insurer's post-indemnification recovery rights. Reason D is not correct. Refers to an exclusion clause eliminating coverage for intentional acts, not the assignment of recovery rights. Question 3. Which of the following best defines liability in the context of insurance? A. Insurer's duty to defend and indemnify the insured under policy terms. B. Legal responsibility to compensate another party for damages or injury. C. Procedure enabling an insurer to recover paid claims from a third party at fault. D. Transfer of risk from the policyholder to the insurer in return for a premium. The correct answer is B. The correct answer defines liability as the legal responsibility to compensate another party for damages or injury. Liability establishes the obligation to pay for losses caused. Reason A is not correct. Describes insurer duties under a policy rather than the broader legal obligation to pay damages. Reason C is not correct. Explains the subrogation process, which is distinct from the general concept of liability. Reason D is not correct. Refers to risk transfer mechanics, not the direct legal duty to compensate for harm. Question 4. Which of the following best describes the primary purpose of the declarations page in an insurance policy? A. To define key policy terms and contractual language. B. To detail the policy's exclusions and specific coverage limitations. C. To summarize essential policy details including the insured, coverages, limits, and premium. D. To outline procedures and obligations for filing a claim under the policy. The correct answer is C. The declarations page provides a quick reference to the policy's primary facts, such as the named insured covered property, coverage limits, deductibles, and premium, allowing stakeholders to identify key terms at a glance. Reason A is not correct. Defining terms is handled in the definitions section, not on the declarations page. Reason B is not correct. Exclusions and coverage limitations are specified in the exclusions section rather than on the declarations page. Reason D is not correct. Claim procedures and obligations are outlined in the policy's conditions section, not on the declarations page. Question 5. Which of the following duties is typically found in the conditions section of a standard insurance policy as a requirement the insured must fulfill to maintain coverage? A. Promptly notify the insurer of any claim or loss event. B. Waive any right to subrogation after the insurer pays the claim. C. Extend the coverage territory to include properties owned by the insured. D. Increase the policy's aggregate limit upon request. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is the requirement to promptly notify the insurer because notice of loss is explicitly included in the policy's conditions section. The other options describe endorsement changes or actions unrelated to policy conditions. Reason B is not correct. Waiving subrogation rights is not a standard insured duty. Subrogation is addressed under a separate policy provision. Reason C is not correct. Extending coverage territory is achieved via endorsement, not listed as a duty under the conditions section. Reason D is not correct. Increasing the aggregate limit requires an endorsement or amendment, not a conditions-based insured obligation. Question 6. According to Maine insurance law, which of the following is a specific statutory authority vested in the superintendent of insurance? A. Suspend or revoke a domestic insurer's certificate of authority. B. Set maximum compensation rates for injured workers under workers' compensation policies. C. Adjudicate disputes between employers and employees regarding benefit eligibility. D. License self-insured employer groups to provide workers' compensation coverage. The correct answer is A. The superintendent's statutory duties include the power to suspend or revoke an insurer's certificate of authority under Title II 4A. Reason B is not correct. Rate setting for workers' compensation is governed by the Workers' Compensation Board and NCCI filings, not by the superintendent. Reason C is not correct. Disputes between employers and employees over benefits are adjudicated by the Workers' Compensation Board, not by the superintendent. Reason D is not correct. Approval and licensing of self-insured employer groups fall under the Workers' Compensation Board's authority. Question 7. Under the Maine Administrative Procedures Act as applied to insurance regulation, what is the minimum advance notice period required for a contested case hearing held by the superintendent of insurance? A. 5 calendar days. B. 7 calendar days. C. 14 calendar days. D. 20 calendar days. The correct answer is B. The Maine APA mandates at least 7 calendar days written notice before a contested case hearing. Reason A is not correct. 5 days is shorter than the APA's minimum requirement of 7 days. Reason C is not correct. 14 days is commonly used for rulemaking notice, but is not the contested case minimum. Reason D is not correct. 20 days applies in certain rulemaking emergencies, not standard contested case hearings. Question 8. Which of the following functions is uniquely performed by the Maine Workers' Compensation Board rather than the Superintendent of Insurance? A. Approving employer applications for workers' compensation self-insurance. B. Conducting financial examinations of domestic insurers. C. Licensing independent insurance adjusters. D. Promulgating administrative rules for trade practices. The correct answer is A. The Workers' Compensation Board holds exclusive authority to approve employer self-insurance applications for workers' compensation. Reason B is not correct. Financial examinations of insurers are conducted by the Superintendent of Insurance. Reason C is not correct. Licensing of independent adjusters falls under the superintendent's regulatory duties. Reason D is not correct. Rulemaking for trade practices is within the superintendent's administrative rule authority. Question 9. Under Maine law, which type of adjuster license must an individual obtain to adjust workers' compensation claims on behalf of an insurer? A. Surplus lines adjuster license. B. Company executive officer insurance license. C. Resident individual adjuster license with workers' compensation line authority. D. Public adjuster license. The correct answer is C. The correct answer is that a resident individual adjuster license designated for the workers' compensation line is required for adjusting workers' compensation claims on behalf of a licensed insurer in Maine. Reason A is not correct. A surplus lines adjuster license applies to non-admitted carriers and is not valid for standard workers' compensation claims. Reason B is not correct. That license is for insurance company officers and does not authorize claim adjusting duties. Reason D is not correct. A public adjuster license is for representing insureds, not for insurer-appointed claim handling. Question 10. Which individual is exempt from the adjuster licensing requirement under Maine insurance law? A. A public adjuster representing an injured employee in a COMP claim. B. A non-resident adjuster handling workers' compensation claims in Maine. C. A volunteer adjusting claims for a nonprofit disaster relief organization. D. An employee of a self-insured employer adjusting its own workers' compensation claims. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is that employees of self-insured employers who adjust only their own workers' compensation claims are exempt from licensure under Maine law. Reason A is not correct. Public adjusters must be licensed to represent insureds, including injured employees. Reason B is not correct. Non-resident adjusters must hold a valid non-resident license to adjust in Maine. Reason C is not correct. Volunteer status does not create a license or exemption for claim adjusting duties. Question 11. Which of the following is a statutorily valid ground for refusing to issue an adjuster license in Maine? A. Charging fees that deviate from standard commission schedules. B. Filing of a customer complaint with the superintendent regarding claims handling. C. Reason A is not correct. Open-ended questions allow free responses and do not enforce quantitative allocation among options. D. Conviction of a criminal offense involving dishonesty or moral turpitude. The correct answer is D. The correct answer is that a conviction for an offense involving dishonesty or moral turpitude is expressly listed in statute as a ground for license refusal in Maine. Reason A is not correct. Fee schedules are regulated, but deviation alone is not a grounds for license denial. Reason B is not correct. A complaint alone does not meet statutory grounds for refusal unless it results in disciplinary action. Reason C is not correct. Incomplete education delays processing, but is not a cause for outright refusal under statutory grounds. Question 12. A Maine workers' compensation adjuster's license expired on June 30th, and the adjuster failed to submit a renewal application before that date. Under Maine law, what must the adjuster do to resume lawful adjuster activities? A. Submit a renewal application with a late fee within 30 days of expiration. B. Cease all adjuster activities and apply for reinstatement within 1 year, completing required continuing education and paying overdue fees. C. Continue adjusting claims during a statutory 60-day grace period and file renewal before its end. D. Request a 90-day interim extension from the Superintendent of Insurance while processing the renewal. The correct answer is B. Under Maine law, an expired adjuster license voids authority, requiring cessation of all activities and reinstatement within 1 year by meeting continuing education and fee requirements. Reason A is not correct. There is no provision allowing a late renewal within 30 days by just paying a fee without full reinstatement requirements. Reason C is not correct. Maine law does not provide a 60-day grace period for adjuster license renewal after expiration. Reason D is not correct. The superintendent cannot grant a temporary extension for license renewal. Full reinstatement procedures apply. Question 13. Under Maine insurance law, the prohibited practice known as twisting is defined as which of the following? A. Inducing an insured to lapse or surrender a policy in favor of a new one by making misrepresentations or incomplete comparisons of benefits. B. Failing to conduct a reasonable investigation before denying a claim submitted by a policyholder. C. Offering an unlisted rebate or inducement to persuade a consumer to purchase a policy under more favorable terms. D. Charging higher premiums to a specific class of insureds without actuarial or underwriting justification. The correct answer is A. Twisting involves persuading a policyholder to replace or surrender an existing policy through deceptive comparisons or misrepresentations about the new policy's benefits, making it an unfair trade practice under Maine law. Reason B is not correct. This describes an unfair claim settlement practice rather than twisting. Reason C is not correct. This describes rebating, which involves offering unauthorized inducements, not twisting. Reason D is not correct. This describes unfair discrimination in premium setting, not twisting. Question 14. An adjuster handling a clear Maine workers' compensation claim receives all required documentation from the injured worker. More than 30 days pass without any coverage determination or benefit payment, despite multiple claimant inquiries. Which of the following claims handling methods is most likely to be treated as a prohibited practice under Maine law? A. Providing the claimant with written notice of appeal rights and hearing procedures. B. Requiring the claimant to sign a broad liability release before arranging an initial medical evaluation. C. Informing the claimant that use of the insurer's preferred pharmacy network is optional. D. Withholding a coverage decision and delaying benefit payment without a reasonable basis. The correct answer is D. Unjustified delays in coverage decisions and benefit payments violate Maine's prompt claims settlement standards and constitute an unfair trade practice. Reason A is not correct. Providing appeal and hearing information is required by law, not prohibited. Reason B is not correct. Requiring a release before evaluation is not inherently prohibited and may be part of standard claim processing with informed consent. Reason C is not correct. Offering optional pharmacy network use is permissible and does not amount to an unfair practice. Question 15. Under Maine insurance law, which characteristic defines a domestic insurer? A. Possession of an active Maine certificate of authority. B. Maintenance of its principal place of business within Maine. C. Writing more than 50% of its premium volume in Maine. D. Incorporation under the laws of the state of Maine. The correct answer is D. A domestic insurer under Maine law is one incorporated under Maine statutes. The other choices describe place of business, underwriting activity, or licensing status, which do not determine domestic status. Reason A is not correct. Incorrect because holding a certificate of authority permits business activity but does not confer domestic insurer status. Reason B is not correct. Incorrect because the location of the principal place of business does not establish statutory domicile in Maine. Reason C is not correct. Incorrect because premium volume produced in Maine does not affect corporate domicile status. Question 16. Under Maine workers' compensation law, which of the following best describes the criteria for an injury to be compensable? A. It arises out of employment and requires at least 7 days of disability benefits. B. It arises out of and in the course of employment and results in death, disability, or need for medical treatment. C. It occurs during work hours and leads to any level of lost wages. D. It is any injury at the workplace requiring more than first aid care. The correct answer is B. Compensability under Maine law requires an injury to arise out of and in the course of employment and to cause death, disability, or need for medical treatment. Reason A is not correct. This option omits the in the course of employment requirement and misstates the benefit threshold. Reason C is not correct. This option addresses timing and lost wages without requiring the causal employment link or specified outcomes. Reason D is not correct. This option improperly limits compensability to injuries beyond first aid rather than the statutory outcomes. Question 17. Under Maine workers' compensation law, which worker classification is automatically excluded from mandatory coverage? A. Sole proprietors. B. Executive officers who elect coverage. C. Seasonal employees. D. Independent contractors. The correct answer is D. Independent contractors are not considered employees under Maine workers' compensation statutes and are excluded from mandatory coverage. Reason A is not correct. Sole proprietors may elect to be covered under Maine law and are not automatically excluded. Reason B is not correct. Executive officers may opt out but are not automatically excluded unless they elect coverage. Reason C is not correct. Seasonal employees are treated as employees and must be covered if employed. Question 18. Under Maine workers' compensation law, which of the following satisfies an employer's obligation to provide required coverage? A. Relying exclusively on a third-party administrator without an insurance policy. B. Purchasing a workers' compensation policy from any insurer licensed in another state. C. Procuring a policy from an insurer authorized in Maine or obtaining approval to self-insure. D. Securing coverage only through participation in an excess liability policy. The correct answer is C. An employer meets its obligation by purchasing coverage from an insurer authorized in Maine or by being approved for self-insurance by the superintendent. Reason A is not correct. A third-party administrator cannot provide coverage without an underlying policy or self-insurance approval. Reason B is not correct. Out-of-state only licensing does not satisfy Maine's requirement for an authorized insurer. Reason D is not correct. An excess liability policy alone does not meet the workers' compensation coverage obligation. Question 19. Under Maine workers' compensation law, which of the following is excluded from the calculation of an employee's average weekly wage? A. Shift differential pay. B. Employer contributions to health insurance premiums. C. Overtime wages. D. Performance-based bonuses. The correct answer is B. Health insurance contributions made by the employer are not wages and are excluded from the average weekly wage calculation. Reason A is not correct. Shift differentials are part of regular wages for average weekly wage purposes. Reason C is not correct. Overtime wages are included in the wage base for average weekly wage calculations. Reason D is not correct. Performance-based bonuses are treated as wages and included in the computation. Question 20. Under Maine workers' compensation law, what is the mandatory waiting period before temporary total disability benefits become payable? A. 5 calendar days. B. 7 calendar days. C. 10 calendar days. D. 14 calendar days. The correct answer is B. Maine law requires a waiting period of 7 calendar days before TTD benefits become payable, with benefits retroactive if disability extends beyond 14 days. Reason A is not correct. 5 days is shorter than the statutory waiting period. Reason C is not correct. 10 days exceeds the 7-day waiting period mandated by statute. Reason D is not correct. 14 days equals the cutoff for retroactivity but is not the initial waiting period. Enjoyed this practice test? Tap like, hit subscribe, and share it with a classmate. Got a question we should tweak? Comment below. We read them all. Find full practice exam books in the description or at ExamPrep.School.